Welcome to the Community Conversations with Alex and Nadine, brought to you by Base Range. On this podcast, we discuss topics from education and women's rights to racial inequality to sustainability within the clothing industry and how it affects our planet and much, much more. With these conversations, our goal is to highlight each other's humanity and make this world a better place for everyone.
Oh, thank you. And today we have a wonderful special guest, a wonderful friend, Margarita from Colombia. And we are so excited to bring her story, her community's story, her country's story to you, our special listeners. And so welcome, Margarita.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a treat to be here with you.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on our show here. And I feel I haven't spoken to you. We met last year.
Yes.
Yeah, that was back in 2022.
Yeah, just like a
brief.
Brief meeting. I went to the. I have to remember the name. Is it Filbo? The Filbo?
Yes,
Filbo.
Yes, yeah, and unfortunately, Nadine, you couldn't be there. We've spoken about that before.
Yeah,
but you couldn't be there during that particular event. But it was great. Just being immersed in the culture, and once I knew that you were taken care of, it was amazing. And just all the people I got to meet, and again, in the culture, what's the word? I ingrained myself. I just sort of enveloped myself in everything. It was a little nerve-wracking, but it was, I think, one of the best decisions that we had made being able to be in Bogota.
Absolutely. Like, because when you're about to travel to countries that have had a history of wars for decades and decades, people have different ideas of how that country looks like and the experiences. And so until you're there yourself, you really don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Doesn't matter if people say, okay, you're not gonna arrive to the airport and there are gonna be squads killing you.
Yeah, right.
Yes, they don't understand. And so that was really a wonderful experience for me, even though I got, deported and all that. But I came back this year and we had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
But I learned so much about not all of it, but the history of Colombia. And I was honored to have someone like you who's been working. You are Colombian, but also the work that you've been doing as a journalist, as a filmmaker. You get to be at places where probably most Colombians don't have that opportunity to be in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we came on here, the first thing you said was like, you know what I was doing? The inauguration. Can you please tell us what was your day? How was your day?
So I just came from a ceremony of inauguration of a ceasefire between the Colombian government and the ELN, that is the National Liberation Army. That's the 59-year-old guerrilla established in 1964 in the heat of the Cuban Revolution, of the Marxist expansion of ideas in the world and so on.
Yes.
And Colombia has this incredibly long war.
Yeah.
And it has started going down, bits by bits.
Mm-hmm.
And just talking about the guerrilla war, this would be the last rebel group that is active. We have many other groups that are not political groups, but that live off coca, the cocaine traffic, and so on. So I was there and I saw so many people. It was full of the communities where the war is still at play. That are basically indigenous communities, Afro-Colombian communities in the borders of the country, because basically the country has this kind of like established, or the state governs most of the center.
Yeah.
But the borders, meaning the Pacific, the border with Venezuela, the border with Ecuador, that is basically very jungly, are still at war. And that's where some of the places where those communities who have been affected the most in the conflict are. And the auditorium was full, but like 500 people were there from communities, from those types of communities. So it was very moving. And also this hope, when you have a long war, you're always thinking that it's going to be another disillusionment.
Yeah.
This is really not going to stop.
Yeah.
So, and now, for example, the International Red Cross says that in Colombia there are like 6 other groups that are not politically motivated, but that control territory and control rents, as they say, which is basically narco traffic or illegal mining. So, going to this would be the last guerrilla group in Latin America, which was full of guerrilla groups from Mexico to Chile, with the notable exception of Costa Rica, but all of them had guerrilla groups, and Colombia has the last one. So no matter, it's like still not an ideal situation, but it's like this slow advancement to reach peace and to almost like community by community.
I know. So what the first step, a step towards what you guys have been looking for a very, very long time.
It feels, and the thing that kind of jumped out to me was just how much of a process it is to reach this idea of peace that we all have. It's so much more complicated a lot of times than we like to assume. But it doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means
possible.
there are usually far more steps involved than we generally will consider.
Absolutely.
And you said
is that the experts say that war is a lot easier. Making war is a lot easier than making peace.
Yes.
And it's so undervalued. Like peace, it should be like from spiritual people, religious people, ladies, and like the tough guys. We are in the war, but it takes so much courage to talk to your enemy. It takes so much bravery to sit down to people that you have hurt and that they have hurt you or your people. That is unimaginable.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Really understated.
Yes, especially those who choose to do that. Those are special kind of people who are like, yes, I was hurt. Yes, my community was hurt, but we have to cut this cycle. We cannot keep circling around the same things that we've done for many, many years. And that takes me to a question for people who don't know, Margarita. And I actually don't even know. How was it for you growing up in Colombia? In your childhood, what are your earliest memories?
Well, because the war was not really in the cities. And when I was a child, for example, my father's side of the family is from Cartagena, which is a colonial port in the Caribbean, and it was so peaceful. You could go out anytime by yourself at night. I remember I was 14 or something, and there was like a dancing place nearby. You could go. No one would say, "Oh no, you have to go with someone." It was, we were, teenagers, and we'd just go there and come back by ourselves, and no one thought that was dangerous. But then when I was starting college, the narco war came to the cities, and Pablo Escobar started bombing Bogota, especially, and attacking policemen all over the country. He offered 1 million pesos, which is, I don't know, like $200 per policeman that someone killed.
Yeah.
So I remember going to university and saying, "Oh, there's another bombing. There's another bombing nearby, not so nearby." So with this popularization of Pablo Escobar, that is kind of glamorous and so, like a Robin Hood or something. Like, oh my God.
That's what most of us think. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good for TV, but it's not good for real life.
No.
So I didn't live in the countryside. So I, especially in the South, the war is has been present for a long time. And then other parts of the country started getting involved little by little. When for example, the Caribbean was, this place where people really enjoy life, and death and war was not in their history or what they had, or what they have experienced. And the paramilitary groups, so the guerrillas started going also in the north, and there were formed paramilitary groups that were financed by the narcos, the big cattle ranchers, and they created an army that displaced and killed.
Mm.
I think the number of internally displaced people is 8 million in a
8
country
million.
of 45 million. So basically, most of the countryside suffered heavily, heavily, heavily.
Yeah.
And there are places where, one or three people have been a victim or their family have been a victim. But basically, regions where everybody was
Yeah.
touched deeply, intimately, and personally by the war.
Have you always lived in the Colombia?
Well, I had a scholarship, so I went to study my master's degree at Columbia University at the journalism school. So that was amazing, and I'm really grateful for that scholarship because that sort of really changed my life. That opportunity.
How was it for you to, to have grown up like that with a country that was torn by war, and having the opportunity to be outside of the country and hearing how the country's talked about, or the experience of outside people? Did you like get to learn more about your own country when you were outside? How was it, that experience for you, looking from outside in?
Well, one thing is, you always are ashamed because people say, "Oh, so are you bringing drugs? So you're the cocaine people." So there's always this stigma that you carry.
God.
Starting
You've been
from
called the cocaine people?
Huh?
You've been referred to as the cocaine person, the cocaine people?
Well, just recently, like a couple years ago, I went someplace in Europe, and some person, I said, "Oh, so where are you from?" "I'm from Colombia." It's like, "Oh, so you bring some cocaine, you cocaine people." So yeah, so basically, it's it makes you feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I can imagine. I can imagine. From all of that, what was the moment where you knew you wanted to do storytelling and tell the story? Because I know you tell stories that are very difficult to tell and to even reach, and you putting yourself in those positions. When was the moment where you knew you wanted to be a journalist, wanted to be a filmmaker, you wanted to tell stories?
Well, I went to a college and basically I didn't know what to do, but I was, circling around. And when I graduated, I started working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like the Department of State in Colombia. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be this. But I had the opportunity to go with the work at Bolivia and Peru. And I'm like, what I want to know is how these peasant coca communities live.
Yeah.
And so I started applying to journalism jobs, and they say, "No, well, you don't have no experience." But I was 24 or 25, so I applied for a scholarship, applied for the journalism school, and finally got in. Worked for NBC in New York for a year with that training that they let you in at work. And then when there was this opportunity to stay or not, I thought, oh, I'm not staying. And that was a very odd decision because it was 1999, and it was the worst recession in Colombia, and it was basically a failed state. The paramilitaries control one region, the others, the two main groups control other regions. It was a disaster, but I felt, I really love this country, meaning the United States. It's so great, how wonderful, but this is not my story. So I decided, no, I'm going back. So I applied for a job at the Associated Press in Bogota, and that's where I started with the AP in Bogota. And I covered for 7 years one of the high points of this war, where the massacres were massive, where the kidnappings were massive, where there was a huge humanitarian crisis because of the war. And I felt that my work was so important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I felt like, I'm so indispensable here. Which is always an exaggeration or whatever. But I felt like, the AP had money to travel. All the newspapers and all the media in Colombia was broke because of the economic situation. And I felt that I had the opportunity to be a witness of it. And I took it really seriously. So that's sort of my first love of my first love, no, my biggest love of having been all over Colombia in a time of very, very, very difficult situations.
Yeah. That's something that's very interesting. And it makes me think, I was born in Texas, and in the States, and I was born in the early 90s. I don't, there's not much that has happened in my life. So I'm not trying to put a date on anybody, but it makes people, I think a lot of people, like I can speak for a lot of people in that we don't really have a lot of like a concept of what it means to be in a country or state or continent that is filled with
That's going
danger,
through war.
that is going through war, there's a certain amount of existentialism that we have to sort of cope with.
That's the first thing I realized here in the US. The war in the US happens outside the US. US go to war, but it's outside of US. So the population of the United States people don't experience that war.
Mhm.
They hear about it. Maybe the military is gonna experience that, but civilians, everyday people don't get to be affected firsthand. And so that's one of the things I realized that was different from, like back home in Rwanda going through genocide. If you were just a civilian, you still experienced the war and genocide. And as you were speaking as well, it's the same thing. The war is happening between the guerrillas and the government, but it's also affecting the civilians because everything is happening within the country.
Exactly.
So no one is immune from it.
No one is immune.
No.
And no, not even us in the cities. Now, of course, the cities are a different thing. But I mean, there are many problems here. But one is the political problem, because this is one of the 2 or 3 more unequal countries of Latin America. It's a very unequal society. And there had been rebel groups and so on that wanted to change that situation. For example, land property. 1% of the people own, I think it's 89% or 89% of all the land, all the productive land in Colombia.
Yeah.
So it's such a disparity in the property of the land, in the property of who can have access to resources, to places, to opportunities, and so on.
Yeah.
That's like the political situation. And the other one is the international situation we have. Colombia is a big producer of cocaine, and that has fueled all the rebel groups and the paramilitary groups that were formed to defeat the rebel groups, and with big help with the army. They were, collided with the army.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they all got financed by the drug war, because if the drugs are illegal, then it's a great business.
Yes.
So we indirectly, or actually in a very direct way, we live and suffer the consequences of declaring that war.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something you mentioned, Pablo Escobar. Here in the States, you may be aware of the show Narcos on Netflix.
Yes.
Look, I watched that show, I think probably when it came out about 10 years ago or so. And I didn't know anything about, I didn't know much outside of what they told us to learn in public school.
Yeah.
But you're right in that there is a portrayal about like the Robin Hood. Like there's this glamorized portrayal of him, and the actor who played him. I think his name is
charismatic.
Very charismatic, very charming, and it's like, oh wow, maybe he wasn't
as charming.
Of course, maybe what we've heard about him as being this.
Well, I mean, people are complex, and he really cared. He came from a humble family, and he cared about the people who suffered. And in this country, I just told you the land statistic. It's gross. How can almost 1% cast almost all the land?
That's it's like it's shameful.
Yeah.
So it's shameful when living that way and accept it and feel like it's the right way of living when everyone around you is suffering and you have an abundance of things. And you're not even using it, because I'm sure if it's 1%, that means most of those lands are not even being used.
Oh, and there had been land reform. This is probably the only country that there hasn't been land reform in Latin America, where they say, okay, you cannot have either you pay very high taxes, or we're gonna take away from you the land that you're not using, or until this amount. But here, I mean, one of the reasons, the main reason that historically the guerrillas have said that they formed and are created and actually continue is because they want peasants to have access to the land.
Yeah.
So of course Pablo Escobar was into something, and of course he was charming
in the wrong way.
a lot of people. But in my case particularly, it wasn't that nice to go to college every day, because here you don't go to like a university town. You still live at home. So
Right.
at least, so you go, it's like 45 minutes back and forth or whatever. And you go to school. And that was like a dangerous thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you don't know where or when the bombing was going to take place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And growing with that fear too. Like,
well, it shapes you. I think especially at the younger age, college age kids.
Yeah.
That has an impact on how they view adulthood and how they view how they interact with the world. And, the job market and the sort of work that you do. I mean,
other people.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
And that makes me think. So last year when I had gone to Colombia, we had gone to Buenaventura. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of the biggest, or I think the port city, like one of the most important port cities in all of Colombia. But when you go there,
it's so poor.
It's absolutely there are no resources given to
the
or very little resources given to
nothing stays there. They just see all the richness go.
It's just
nothing there. Nothing. I mean, it's so unfair.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
So that's why you think, why does this war last so long? Why they haven't made changes? Why it has taken, for example, leftist leaders have been killed, community leaders, regional leaders, presidential candidates that not even left, but that want like a fair share for everybody in the society get killed. For me, I mean, in 1989, that you weren't born.
You still remember
4 presidential candidates. 4. Can you imagine? By the right-wing forces in alliance with part of the government. So structural changes have been almost impossible to make. And in 2 years ago, 1 year ago, we had this huge, after COVID, we had these huge demonstrations and so on. And that was 2 years ago. And last year, for the first time in 200 years of being a republic, we had a leftist president. We don't know if he's going to be able to make changes or not.
Wait, hold on. That was the first time in 200 years that you had a leftist president.
Yes.
And the power was handed over peacefully, smooth.
Well,
peacefully
now, because they kill and kill all the leftists or even centrist candidates. But in small towns, in medium cities, and the people who are running for the national government.
Yeah.
So they kill so many. Just one party, there was that is called Unión Patriótica, UP. 3,000 of its members of this communist party were killed. 3,000 just in that party.
Goodness.
So then you say, well, why do we have this ongoing eternal war? Because if things not change, people feel like, okay, why would I put down my arms and my weapons if nothing changes? Yeah. So with this massive strikes and so on, I think the elites thought that maybe this time they were not. They had to give a chance to these other people, and maybe we'll see what happens, because there are lots of scandals and lots of I get sometimes the impression that they're new to power,
Yeah. That was you speaking, and we're talking all the things that the people that have been assassinated, and I'm thinking about your job as a journalist, because and a filmmaker. I remember when we were in Medellin, we were screening of your documentary, La negocian, la negocian,
La negociación.
la negociación. And it was a very informative, well documented documentary. Like really, like the access for me when I was watching. I don't even think I've told you what I thought about it. Our emotions were everywhere. But the access to both the government, to the FARC guerrillas, and how you were able to film the whole process to peace and stay safe. For me, the whole time I was imagining how terrifying that must have been, knowing that you're all going to expose information that not most people have access on, that can also change your country's history, because you probably didn't know that it was going to go through when you start filming it.
No, actually, it's so most of the time I was like, why am I here? This is not going to happen. Well, Didin, actually, I felt very safe in that filming that, because it was in Havana and they were negotiating. I was but when I covered and filmed in Colombia, then then it's different,
Yes.
But over there, it was, even though it was the hardest thing I have ever done, because there's nothing hardest than people who hate each other trying to negotiate.
Yeah.
And that includes who wants you to be filmed trying to make concessions to your eternal enemies.
Yeah.
And things that you say today, then maybe in a year it's going to consider to be a treason and so on. So it was very hard. But I had been a filmmaker and a journalist for almost 20, for
20 years.
Almost 20 years. I had kind of like the conscience that it was important to have a document of what happened and how it happened, and also the enemies and can have an agreement, and that changes the life of the people on the ground.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that kept me going. Like, if this goes through, and this is a lesson for the world and for the other parts of Colombia that still think that talking to your enemies it's better to get killed and kill forever than talking to them. So I thought that was so important.
Yes, absolutely. And even I applaud for you to be able to stay objective, because that wasn't a story of your own country, your own people, as the story is unfolding, and just being able to stay professional, to stay not feel emotionally, you've gone through so much, you've seen so much with all the work you've done, and is facing, like you said, the enemy, and just be able to talk or let them say all their emotions to you and stay objective, not be. So I think that was very special for me when I was watching it.
Thank you so much. It was very hard to try to do that. And I don't know, but I always thought when I was doing it, and with my emotions and my own prejudices and everything, I thought, this cannot be a pamphlet. I cannot see it in 10 years and be ashamed of myself, of how, emotional and I was. No, I need to leave the best testimony I can of how this agreement with the most violent and feared guerrilla, the FARC, and a government that has so many sins, like killing people out of combat just so the soldiers could go on vacation, or that established this body count as a measure of success, and with that measure of moving up the ladder and so on. I mean, two sides that had so many sins, crimes, that they can say, okay, let's stop. Let's see how we can work this out.
Right.
So thank you, Didi.
I'm part of that. And I remember one of the word that I hope people are watching or listening, please find the document. We're going to add a link of the documentary, because it has also English subtitles to watch. And it feels like you're on a journey with everyone, like everything as it's unfolding. And I remember the president at the time, is that, I think, the Santos?
Yeah.
Yes. when
No,
he
it's Santos. Santos.
Santos. I know. The Santos is another
Yeah,
story.
you have to differentiate.
Santos, he in the car, he said, "I did not have Plan B." When the first time, and that was so emotional for me. Was when you were so hopeful, and you don't want anything else. You want peace. And when he said that with all his emotions, like, I thought it was gonna work. I thought my people were ready for peace, and I didn't have Plan B. That made it even more real, because as you're filming, you don't know, and as him going through it as well, you don't know the outcome.
Yeah.
You don't know. So
It's this great unknown that you
No.
are. That's very interesting. And of course, I haven't seen the film yet,
Yeah.
but I can just imagine what that would feel like, and that he's convicted, and that this is the only thing that we have.
That's
we
the
have
only
planned.
card
That's
we
the
have.
only thing that we're going for.
Yeah.
And we don't know how it's going to work out, but in his mind, he's like, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
One way or another. And that has like a ripple effect for everybody.
Absolutely.
Especially people who are recording here.
I'm wondering who was the people who were recording.
Right.
What did you think was gonna happen? What did you think was gonna work?
No. Well, no. I was. You mean the plebiscite? No, I thought. I mean, yes and no.
But yes.
Yes, and in myself and my small circle. But for example, my mother voted against it because she said, because there was a huge opposition to but they won. They won by less than 1% of the votes, but they won.
Yes.
And for example, my mother said they don't deserve to have immunity. They don't deserve to have amnesty. They don't deserve to just come among us like if nothing had happened. They need to face prison, and a long time prison. They don't deserve anything.
Accountability. Yes.
Exactly. But my mother, since she lives in the city, is not so aware of how the army and the paramilitaries that in many ways were part of the army or collaborated with the army had destroyed towns, massacres, killings, etc., to supposedly get rid of the guerrillas, but later take the mines, take the oil, and of course, starting in those regions the coca leaf production.
Yeah.
So the people from some cities was very. I mean, basically, there was a map that showed who voted yes and who voted no, and the people who have suffered the war by enormous numbers, they voted for the end of the war with the FARC. And the people who were in the cities, untouched and having this intellectual conversations of amnesty and justice and so on, voted against it.
Right.
So it's also when the countries have lost their links, have lost some people see a reality that others don't live.
Right. Right.
I see what yeah. And that's how even in the whole world, that's how we are. The disconnect of you. Yeah. Yes, that's how we are. There's war in the country nearby, and you just keep going. Your life is fine, and people are dying. And we have this disconnect that if you're doing well, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
But that grows, and it ends up, getting to all of us. It's like a bad virus,
Yeah. It's I guess that's kind of the undertone of my question or my comment rather about me growing up in the States and not really having
we
much.
cut you off.
No, it's okay, but it's good that we were able to expound on that. Because again, a lot of people like myself don't have a lot of first-hand experience with like how the real effects of conflict and war and violence. There are isolated moments, of course, every day, everywhere in the world.
The shootings or the
but
not for decades.
Not for decades.
I go, for example, to the States, and because there are lots of displaced people, and there was a moment where the common criminality, the petty crimes in the cities became so big because we received millions of people into the cities. And just to think, I think from Mexico to at least Bolivia, I don't know how it's in Chile or Argentina, that you walk and the streets are not safe.
Yeah.
And That's feeling of walking in this, walking on the street and looking who's behind you all the time.
Mhm.
Then when I go abroad and like there's no need, like
There's
there's
no-
people behind you, but that's
They're behind you.
Yeah. There's a general just
Yes.
trust in the person who you don't know 20
Yes.
feet behind you
Than your friend.
that they're not going to. Right.
You trust the people you don't know than the people you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah, like I'm all the time like doing like this, behind my back.
Yes.
Mhm. Well, I'm kind of like that as well. My dad was a
must be
police officer. Maybe a little bit. My dad was a police officer, and so I think he taught me
The court
Oh, okay.
awareness.
yeah,
that's how you
spatial
call it.
awareness. I call it court awareness, but it's
Spatial
spatial
awareness.
awareness.
But we
Yes.
have that without not
You're
training.
born with it.
No. Yeah, it's inherent. It's inherent.
Yes. Yes.
I'm curious, and I'm going to try to format this. I'm going to word this question to the best of my ability. But in the work that you've done as a filmmaker, as a journalist, and just existing and
Yeah.
living in these, I don't want to say extreme, but just these environments where
Kind
you
of
are
extreme. Yeah.
you're very aware of
Yeah.
people, and you
Yeah.
understand the human condition, how people operate
Mm.
under differing circumstances. How has your work
Mm.
shaped your perspective on humanity?
Mm.
Like when you go abroad, when you go to the States and you see kind of us kind of like heads in the clouds or kind of
Yeah.
just without much worry a lot of times. But
Yeah.
I mean, what do you see? I mean, I feel like you have a certain
Mm.
idea of there's certain truths in life that you
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
And so how would you,
I don't want to compare it with other places, but places with war.
Yeah.
Mm.
And because I came back from the US in 1999, and from then on, I've been a filmmaker, I've been a journalist for the Associated Press, and then a filmmaker later. And of meeting so many people who are involved in doing horrible things.
Yeah.
And then of this thing of then they are out of war and they seem perfectly normal, nice, considerate. And also going to many places in Colombia where, for example, I filmed a documentary called La Sierra,
Mm.
and it was shown at PBS and BBC, and we went to many festivals and so on. And it was in a neighborhood in Medellin or Medellin.
Yeah. Jean.
Medellin, because Dean already knows.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm so worldly.
So worldly. So in a very poor neighborhood,
Mm.
dominated that by gangs that were articulated with the national paramilitaries. And we followed three very young people.
Yeah.
One was the leader of the gang paramilitary, very charismatic, lovely person who have killed so many of the other gang members, of rival gangs and so on. And then it's this thing that I ask myself, like, what if I have been in this place? Would I have not done that? Would I have been so wise and not carry myself and not let be carried by hate, not let be carried by fear or by vengeance and so on?
Mm.
Because in Bogota, I don't have to question myself because I'm above the daily life of the war in the countryside or places that have been heavily affected by the war.
Yeah.
But when I'm filming there, I'm always asking myself, what would I have done?
Yeah.
What would I have done? Because and my answer is that I'm not above anything.
Mm.
That I don't know, and for example, for me, I've known this guerrilla FARC rebels since I was a journalist. There was a third attempt at peace at the beginning of this century, and they were, in their 40s. I mean, the commanders they are now dead, but let's say that the ones that signed the peace, they were, let's say, in their 40s, had been already like 20 years in war, had been in the communist parties and so on, and then going to guerrilla warfare in the countryside and so on. And they really believe that. And then a long war, I don't know if a short war, but a long war destroys everything. There's no way that you don't commit all kinds of atrocities.
Yeah. Right.
And then I see them, and they are so considerate, and they are so common sense. And then when I talked to them when they were warriors, I thought they really were out of their mind, and that they didn't understand really anything. And with those weapons, we just had to sort of surrender to them or try to kill them, or what we had to do as a country.
Yeah.
And the same with the political structures, like, and I'm not sure if political, I mean, it's this thing like, what do you do with the structures? That is structures that contribute to the hate, structures that contribute to corruption, structures that contribute to inequality, structures, as the dean said, a country is a puzzle, and so many of its key, what's the name of key
holders,
the key parts of the puzzle are in such a bad shape. You cannot have a peaceful country. So
the foundation of it is already compromised.
Compromised. Yeah,
it's like, it's terrible. So I don't know. Sometimes I myself say, okay, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? And I don't have a clear answer, because when you go to many sides, you're like, okay, what is this? What happened here? And then you find not only the feelings and the decisions that people made, but what is the structural part of the country that contributes to that. I'm not answering, but
no, you actually, go ahead.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, it's that is an answer. That's the perfect answer. And I think the point here is that people, and like you said earlier, Margarita, is that people are very complex. And that question, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, we all have some sliver of good and bad, and in every single one of us. And but when you put someone in a particular situation that is very trying, and you are forced to survive, and you're forced to do things that you would prefer not to do regularly, or you would prefer not to have a past. You could speak to it as well, Dean. You would not want to have a past that, it's maybe a bit shameful to speak about, or whatever. But how do you survive as a person? What does that do to the psychology? What does that do to your mind? And what does that do to the survival instinct? So you have
beliefs. It scares me how much the beliefs really take you beyond what is normal, common sense. Just basics of humanity, and some beliefs, and so this thing sort of changes people so much.
Absolutely. In the twisted beliefs that, especially if it's inserted in a young mind, it's very difficult for that young mind who's been taught, to hate, who's been taught, like, killing somebody is like normalized in their lives. Like you mentioned, those young 3 men, they're charismatic, they're nice, they're everything, but also they've been taught that person's life, it doesn't mean anything. If you kill them, you can keep going and be in a band, also dance and sing at the same in the evening, and and your conscience is clean.
Like the normalization and the like naturalization of violence that has lived in this country. It's scary.
It is. Do you, with all the things you've worked on and your life experiences, this is a question, I don't know if it's a random question, but I'm going to ask you again. Do you have hope for Colombians to come together and figure out ways to, like, I know you just came back from the inauguration. That was probably a very hopeful step for you. Do you see more hope? Do you see, like, in the next 10 years, a different Colombia, where your daughter is going to have a different experience than you did growing up?
Well, if I look back when I came back and started working as a journalist, it's so much better. I cannot even tell you. Well, you experienced, I mean, you were in Bogota, you were in Medellin.
Yes, I know. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are much better. there was a huge window of opportunity with the peace process with the FARC because the FARC was the biggest guerrilla group, and they were in many places. So their demobilization meant a lot.
Yeah.
So that the mobilization, or that the government couldn't go into those territories that they govern, and other groups came in, and now we have more groups instead of a huge one FARC. Now we have small things. It's like a step back, but after 3 steps forward. So I guess we're in this game of forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. So I'm not sure, but I see that better. That now is better than 20 years ago. And then the thing with the war on drugs, that I don't want to get into the details of. I want to get into the argument if it's good or bad on people. I mean, obviously, it's not good that people take drugs. Yeah. But how do we go about that? It's a different thing. Yes. And the militarization of the drug war and the huge resources that the Americans have put into Colombia to combat the cocaine traffic have made it enormously profitable. Yeah. Also, there's a window of opportunity here in the sense that apparently people are not consuming cocaine anymore.
So they were consuming it and selling it.
So maybe. Yes. Us here, there would be not this huge amounts of money that narcos make, and that and all of a sudden they can provide so many weapons, and provide for an army. Yeah. So maybe that would be something. All the bad things of drugs that they are other drugs, at least inside, maybe we don't have this huge amounts of drugs of money coming from the drug trade that alters everything, and that would make it easier for peace to consolidate. So this is just I don't know if it's going to happen, but what is happening is that the cocaine trade is diminishing substantially.
Oh, yeah.
A very outside. I mean, it was the war was fueled by that money, and what's going to happen if that money's not there? If that's going to contribute to people.
Oh,
right.
That's a very money is money is the source of all evil.
Yeah, isn't that what they say?
Yes, that's what they say. Yeah. And when it includes drugs as well, that's another. Yeah, that's a really hard.
It is. It is. And when we had started this platform, Tadine and I, with Base Range, it was back in 2020. Yeah. And we had just been speaking recently just about how much 3 years is not a long time, but with the amount of just life events that have taken place, it does feel at times like it was a long time ago. Yeah. And when we talk about hope, I still am hopeful. I think that's
of course
maybe and I don't know. It's just I feel like I've grown up. I see things a little bit differently. Yeah, not necessarily in a cynical way, but I think when the pandemic happened and you were able to see humans interact or engage with this this disruptive thing, for many people that was the first time they'd ever experienced something. Well, yeah, some people came together, some people sort of divided, as we still sort of feel the reverberations of. But what I'm trying to say is I feel like I understand people a little bit better in different extreme circumstances, and that has given me, I think, a lot more empathy and compassion for people who know a particular way of life, and it just gets shifted on its head out of nowhere. And you see the reactions, and you see the sort of avalanche effect of the domino effect of these reactions, and how people's reactions affect communities, how it affects government, the economy, and so on and so forth. So this conversation, I'm not sure if we have answers. I don't think that you presume to have answers on how to fix everything.
Yeah.
But I think just having the conversations,
Yes.
and this is the thing that has been the most consistent from 3 years ago to now, is having the conversations
Yes.
and just being able to sit in the discomfort for a little bit.
Yeah.
And to contemplate how we treat each other and the effects of how we treat each other. I think that is still just as important as it has ever been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
You said something about ripple effects.
Yeah.
And that was I thought of Colombia in the ways that young people, there are people in different groups, they are in the ripple effects of Colombia's history. And that's the empathy that when it comes in, when you look at them, not look at them as the things they've done, but as humans who've been affected by the history of their own, of their own country, and that creates empathy. It creates those feelings of like the feelings of understanding and trying to have, like you said earlier, Margarita, having those conversations, not kill each other, not hurt each other.
Yes.
Yeah. And that takes me to, we have one more, we have like 9 minutes. We've finished, but it takes me to a documentary you talked to me about earlier, that when I was with you in Colombia. I think the with women.
Yes, exactly.
What's the name of the documentary again?
When the Waters Flow as One.
Yes. I wanted to touch on that before we let you go. So how did that come about, and how is it going? And I don't know if it came out yet, but if it came out, where can we find it?
Okay, so UN Women open a bid, is that how you call it? To do a documentary on women that build peace in some of the most difficult regions of Colombia, that are basically what I told you, like sort of like the borders.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I won it. and
congratulations.
and went to film in many of those places. Basically, the border with the Pacific, that is mainly, it's very much an indigenous and Black communities.
Yeah.
It's always so incredible to me to observe people that live in war and dream work for peace. That is something that I say, that is not rational. If you are in the middle of this huge problem, just leave or something. But they don't leave. They start like very afraid, but still they say this cannot go on. This is not fair. This shouldn't happen. So, for example, one of them was a teacher that the guerrillas recruit many young men and women.
Yeah.
As young as 12. So one day she went into her school, and the guerrilla had recruited half of her class, and she decided with the mothers to go to the guerrilla camp to ask them to give them back their kids. That takes so much courage.
Yes.
Like like this lady, going to a full armed commander with some grenades and guns and everything, and say,
we want children.
Give us back some of them. Give us at least the ones who are not 15. That's such a Actually, for example, in that case, he told the ones who are, I think, 14 or something can leave. And actually, some of them didn't want to leave.
Because they're already indoctrinated into the ideas.
They have lived in the war, because the guerrilla passes through your house. You live in the countryside, and it seemed to be, like something interesting. So some of them didn't want to leave, but a lot of them got back. And this acts of enormous bravery against all odds that start like opening cracks in the fear and the atmosphere that the armed people are in charge of everything. I respect that so much.
Yeah.
One of the cases, for example, were of of a community of Afro-Colombian community near the Caribbean, where they had a paramilitary commander who was a sexual abuser. And after there was like a break, they went to the judges, and after like 8 years, he is in prison for a long time. And but they have the bravery to do that when there was still time where you didn't know they were going to come back.
Oh.
When you didn't know if you were really kind of like committing a suicide.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the bravery and the like the sense of self-confidence that brought to that community, that was very beautiful to see. So when you say I'm hopeful, I think I'm hopeful. I'm not naive, but in my 20 plus years now here, I've seen that things have changed, and that acts of force that should be almost like, why would you do that? That's just, don't do that. They do it, then they change things. So I cannot tell you how much I admire them.
Oh.
I think the documentary will be on Amazon next year.
Amazon. Yeah, Amazon. Oh, we're definitely watching you. We're sharing it.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's a story of many women in the world.
Yes, there are so many heroes among us. Like, they are here alive doing things. And when you told me a story of one of the women there, I was like, there's so many heroes in the world. There's so many good people in the world.
Heroes. That's the thing. And I always have this picture, like a photo of, if you're scared, think about it. And then this like grandmother in Buenos Aires, in the Argentinian plaza. And there were all these military men that have disappeared and killed so many of their kids. And there was this old lady with like a wrap, a head wrap here, and they are all there, like with these huge arms and weapons, and she's by herself walking towards them and marching. And that is one of the movements, one of the most inspiring women movements in the world, of how mothers and grandmothers march like if they were crazy, because you have to be crazy to do that.
A little bit.
A little bit of, yes, you have to have a little bit of it.
Crazy in the bad sense. I'm saying like
in a good sense, yes.
Like you against all odds march, and all these military men that was just like moving, killing you in a second. You're still there every Tuesday for months, weeks, months, and years, and then you defeat them. You defeat them by your moral courage.
Yes.
The moral courage is something that is understated too. The power of weapons, the power of of like blah blah blah. But the moral courage is something that is understated, and Gandhi and Mandela taught us about that.
Yes,
but women have also taught us in small spaces and in big spaces that moral courage is something that it's braver.
It is way braver to not. Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's when you say most of those women, when they go take that decision to march, towards danger and seeing it, that's when you are at that place where you say enough is enough.
This is it. Enough
is enough. This is it. Yeah, and you're doing it in your own way.
Yeah.
Yes, Margarita, own it. You're contributing, and new generation, future generations are going to look at your work and learn about their history. You're keeping the history. Yes. You're keeping the memory alive. I know that in Colombia there are no memorials. There are no.
Well, they're starting to be. This is little by little. No?
Oh, good. We have to keep pushing. Yeah, because memory is important. Remembering is important. And history can never be erased. It's not good to be erased because we repeat. Humankind is known for repeating the same things and then expect a different result.
Yeah.
But so that's the contribution that that you're doing, the heroism, the things that you're choosing to do. You could have become something else. You could have chose to stay in New York. You could have but you chose this less traveled path, and that is something to be reckoned with.
Yeah, well, it's an
Yeah, that's the right
honorable
word.
it's an honorable thing.
Yes.
And I think it's a testament to your maybe the calling. We all have callings in our life,
Mhm.
things that just draw us to our potential, the things that we're supposed to accomplish. And I think it's what you had just all these wonderful words you had just said. It just speaks to the type of person that you are,
Mm.
and the work that
Yeah,
you've done.
yeah.
Tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
That will live on. There's a
Yeah.
saying. There's a saying. What we do in life echoes through eternity.
Mm. Even when we're not here, huh?
Yes, right. And so the work that you've done,
Yeah.
the work that we are trying to do is stuff.
Yeah.
It supersedes us
Yeah.
as people and becomes an ideal
Yeah.
to strive towards. I think that's a quote from Superman, actually.
Oh
But I'm gonna
God.
use it. I'm gonna use it.
Those are the best quotes.
Oh no. I can't own that one. But I hope you catch my meaning though. I hope you catch my
Yes,
meaning that
yes.
it's absolutely it is important for us
Yeah.
to take cues from the work that you do, people like you,
Yeah.
and become involved and be the change that we want to see in this world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, what would be your message to young people, especially young women of today, in Colombia and elsewhere? What would be your lasting words?
Well, filming women that live in war and build peace made me realize, because it's such a not women are, well, usually non-threatening, they're not carrying weapons and whatever, so they are more like women from all over the world can relate, not
Mm.
even the women who don't live in war.
Yes.
I learn from them like the courage it takes to change your own environment, because maybe there's no war, but there are lots of unfair things that you can change, and that they do it together. That's what it
Yeah.
calls when the waters flow as one, because they know that they cannot do it together. They cannot do it by themselves. They have to do it together.
Yes. Together.
Mhm.
And that I learned from them that persistence and doing it together takes you a long way.
Long way.
So what you feel that needs to be changed. So
Yes.
the other thing is that when you cover a war for so long and sort of like things change, but not really, then you're like, oh God, nothing matters. This thing that nothing that you do matters.
Yeah.
And when I saw them that were a small grain in this whole region where they lived, and with that small grain, they started changing things. That
Mm.
is a lesson that it took me many years, maybe just to see it, made me believe that that was possible. Even though we all know it's possible because we do it in our daily lives, what we do to contribute or whatever.
Right.
But to see them in the long run, how they started. This nobodies, this
Yeah.
the teacher with 5 mothers. And they
Yes.
are changing things. That would be my lasting word, that don't underestimate your own power.
Mhm.
And that use it together with whoever are your partners in that.
Yeah.
And that injustice is not a given. It's not that we have to accept it. It
Mm.
shouldn't be that way. And your small or big actions or your persistence in the actions can change things. So you don't have to be a hero. You just have to stand up.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
really, really beautiful. And thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's a message for me as well. What you just said, and something to take away, to remember that, just have that little reminder of you can just you are enough. There's so much that you can do from your own little space or the little few things that you have, and
Exactly.
not underestimate ourselves, because we do it often and we don't even know when we do it.
Mm.
We do it
Yeah.
all the time.
Yes. So we have power.
Yeah.
Okay, you got power. I got power.
Yeah.
Believe it and use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I think that's the message of today.
I think so too.
Yes. Don't underestimate your power.
No.
Thank you for this conversation.
This was amazing.
Yeah, this was absolutely a treat.
Yeah.
When I found out, when the dean had told me that you had agreed, I'm like, oh, thank
Oh, please.
I've said so much about you, and I
Yeah,
think he
yeah.
was. We're so excited.
I learned so much from Didi.
Ah,
So I'll send you the link so you can put the negotiation there, because
yes.
I find it's pedagogic.
It is. And I'm so lucky I was able to watch it.
Yeah.
And you were there too. I was, a special moment for me to watch it with you. Also, thank you so much for our listeners for taking your time and listening and learning together and experiencing a world far away from us, some of us. But, seeing the power of community. I think that one of the big messages was when we come together and we can go far.
Yes.
Than when we do
embrace your community, embrace, just like we had just been talking about, embrace each other.
Yes.
You can't do anything important alone.
Yes.
You can't do anything significant alone. You need people.
Yeah.
People are here for us as well. Then we're not enemies. We should not be enemies.
No.
And I think if we continue, you can look at everybody and see something reflected within yourself. Like, oh, I understand this person because they are like me.
Yes.
And all it takes is just the effort to slow down. And that visual, this is kind of a long outro, but the visual of these women walking up to these hulking soldiers with the weapons, and
it's
that
amazing.
Can you say that one more time? The moral
courage.
Moral courage. That's a wonderful phrase.
Was it moral courage?
No, I thought it was not. I don't know. It was moral.
Okay.
We will listen through. We will listen through.
I'll listen through it and say it, because now I say it and now I don't remember. But yeah, the moral high ground. I don't know. But when you're right, when you're right and they're not.
Yes.
I mean, we'll look it up.
And
you send it to me, since it just popped up and it sounded so well.
This is the best outro ever.
The best. But thank you again. Like Dina said, everybody, Base Range community, for embracing Margarita. In our own community in the Base Range world. Stay tuned for the next episode. We will be back speaking to somebody.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.